Earth is home to many creatures. Some may even consider a few of them monsters. But what of those more elusive and hidden creatures? The ones we just can't seem to find. Welcome to Monday Morning Monsters. Cryptozoologist and paranormal researcher Barnaby Jones talks about the unknown, mythical, undiscovered, and unidentified creatures from around the world, and the people who have seen them, look for them, and research them. Hear from witnesses about their encounters, as well as renowned names in the field about their work and research. Barnaby is the founder and lead investigator for Cryptids, Anomalies, and the Paranormal Society, based in Wisconsin. CAPS travels across Wisconsin and beyond, looking for connections between different phenomena and how they can all be connected. Now, your host of Monday Morning Monsters, Barnaby Jones.
Good morning, monsters. How are you all doing out there today? I'm your host, Barnaby, and today's episode is another one of the holiday pre-recorded episodes. There are certain people that I want to get on the show here, and it just so happens that for work schedules and stuff like that, they're not able to make the live show. So during this winter break here that I had, I took the liberty to take some time and pre-record this one. You guys have all heard Kenny Irish was on a couple weeks ago, and he was one of the other ones that we had on. So today, my guest is none other than Emily Fleur. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Happy to be here.
Awesome. I'm glad that we finally got our schedules to work out and could get you to record today. So
Definitely.
All right. So like I said, this is a recorded episode. So if you leave a comment in the comments section, we won't be able to answer it right away. So I want to give you the opportunity. Emily, where can people reach out to you to ask you questions if they have any throughout the show?
They can definitely head to my website. It's theforestfleur.com, as well as my social medias at theforestfleur. I am definitely most active on Facebook and Instagram, so feel free to message me, and I always get back to everybody.
Sounds good. Awesome. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started into this whole crazy world of Bigfoot?
Sure. So I got started when I was just a very young girl. I was always interested in Bigfoot. I had watched documentaries like Monster Quest with my mom, and she would tell me how my grandfather was a believer. And so growing up, Bigfoot was always something I knew about. But it wasn't until I found out about Whitehall, New York, that I really became invested in the subject. I had watched a documentary called The Legend of Bigfoot by Ivan Marks. And although Ivan Marks is now known to be a hoaxer, at the time that I watched the documentary, I didn't know that. And I was really intrigued by what he was doing. I saw this man out in the Pacific Northwest actually searching for Sasquatch and kind of doing that every day. And it made it a little bit more of a tangible dream for me. And so once I discovered Whitehall, New York, that is a location that's kind of the Sasquatch mecca of the East Coast. Whitehall, New York has a lot of rich history with Sasquatch reports. And growing up just outside of New York City, I didn't live in an area where there were Bigfoot reports. And so when I heard of Whitehall, I said, oh my gosh, I have to get up there. So my family, I begged them to take a trip up there. We ended up driving about 4 or 5 hours to get there. We arrived in the town, and it was like a ghost town. No one was around. We had to walk around the streets to find somebody to even ask about the Whitehall, New York encounters. And eventually we stumbled into the Skeensboro Museum and spoke with a curator who told me all about a sighting involving law enforcement in Whitehall. And so at that point, I had watched the documentary with Ivan Marks and saw somebody researching full time. And then I also discovered the Sasquatch history within my own home state. And putting those two together, it really inspired me to begin my research and become really invested in the subject. And so throughout college, I wrote all of my essays on Sasquatch, I researched, and eventually my professors encouraged me to kind of make this dream a reality and start a website and a product line. And so that's kind of how the Forest Fleur was born. I just began researching as much as I could, and then slowly I introduced some products in order to fund my research. And over the years, it's become something so wonderful. I have a great community of fellow researchers that I speak with all across social media and through my website. And I do field work now. I'm out in the field looking for Sasquatch, collecting evidence, and it's just been such a great journey. And so that's kind of how it all started.
That's awesome. That's really cool. I really like your website. I was telling you before we started here, I was checking it out before this show aired or started, and there's a lot of stuff on there. You have a store for one. Let's talk about that. You were talking about like the merchandise that you have for funding this, and you do have like, you know, some apparel and things like that. But a lot of your stuff is based around evidence collection and stuff. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure, yeah. So my degree, I actually went to college to study product development. I wish that there were anthropology classes offered at my school, but unfortunately, you know, there weren't. I went to a fashion school, and that was kind of another dream that I was pursuing along the same time that I was studying Sasquatch. And so when I graduated school, I, you know, got a full-time job, and I just kind of thought to myself, you know, how can I make a little bit of extra money to fund my research, but also giving back to the community that's supporting me? And so I started creating products like coasters, ornaments, magnets out of wood. I would sit down and hand draw them all out and shellac them myself, sand down the wood. Eventually, I got so many sales and people were so interested that I ended up partnering with several different factories all across the world. I have factories in Australia, the US, Canada, China, Pakistan, you name it. So all throughout the years, my product lines have been made by just very small factories supporting their families and working really hard. And I love working together with them. And so, you know, I started out with kind of giftware and apparel, but then I started thinking, you know, what is missing in the Bigfoot community? And throughout my field work, once I began actually going out into the woods and searching for Sasquatch, I realized there were so many tools missing for researchers like myself. People typically cast Sasquatch footprints with Ziploc bags full of plaster. They're mixing it, and you know, they're maybe mixing it with their hand. It's a mess. And then once you're done, you have this plastic bag that you can't reuse because it's covered in plaster. And I thought to myself, how can I eliminate plastic use out in the field and also provide something that's reusable, durable, and helpful to researchers like myself? And so that's how I came up with the idea for a footprint casting collapsible bucket. And so you could collapse it down, throw it in your backpack. It fits in pretty much every standard size backpack. You head out into the field, and if you see something, you just pop out the bucket. You can mix your plaster in there, pour it in, let it dry a little bit, and then once you collapse it again, the plaster just kind of shatters off. And so it's definitely a more environmentally friendly way to do Bigfooting, because I kept thinking to myself, you know, here I am trying to advocate for the protection of Sasquatch's habitat, and I'm contributing to the problem with all of this plastic. And so that was one of the ideas. Another one was a fabulous idea that was given to me by a fellow researcher, Mike Ann. He's known as Tactical Bigfoot Research on social media. He has spent his life in law enforcement, and he really knows how to document evidence. And one time he suggested to me, you know, you should get small little neon flags, and anytime you come across a footprint or something that could be potential evidence, stick a flag next to the prints. So I thought to myself, you know what? Where am I going to find flags like this. I didn't know where to go to find something like that. I said, you know what, I'm going to make my own. And so I worked with a factory in Canada to make some of these amazing evidence flags, bright neon orange with a Sasquatch on them. And, they come in a little pouch, and they kind of go great with the bucket because you can mix your plaster with the flagpole, and you can also stick it in the ground next to a trackway so that you don't step over your own evidence. And so it's been just a joy to be able to combine my two passions, product development and Sasquatch, into kind of one organization where I'm researching, I'm educating, I'm learning, and then I'm also sharing some really unique souvenirs with my audience. It's just been so much fun.
Definitely. I love the flags. I gotta say, those are really cool because there's been many times when we're out there doing investigations and you find a footprint and you start looking for the next one and the next one, and then you go back and you can't find the one that you just found and it's gone. And that is
Right.
a very cool idea. Very cool. Very neat.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. So on your website also, you have a lot of like evidence and stuff. You have some like calls and stuff that people can listen to. You have all kinds of, I mean, it's a lot on the website. It really is. What else do you have on your website? Tell everybody.
Sure. Well, I have an evidence page on my website. That's actually my favorite page of the website because I feel that whether you're a seasoned researcher or a beginner, everybody can learn a little bit from that page. So if you're interested in learning about what Sasquatch is, right? Is it more of an ape? Is it more of a human? Where does it fit on our family tree? There is a lot of information about that. So at one time, throughout the past couple of millions of years, there were all different species of hominid or hominoid. And so a hominoid is basically humans and great apes and their ancestors. And it's kind of this big family tree of apes. And so you have species that range from more ape-like to more human-like, both physically and intellectually. And so it's interesting to kind of look at this family tree as a whole and kind of observe some of the characteristics within the fossil record and see where Bigfoot may fit into the mix. So something I recently added to the website is an entire family tree of species that could be potential ancestors of Sasquatch. And you can click on their faces and it'll give you a little excerpt of how they might be similar to Sasquatch and why they could be a potential ancestor. I don't necessarily know that we have Bigfoot in our fossil record. A lot of people believe that Bigfoot is Gigantopithecus or Paranthropus. However, I think that it could be a species that is close to one of those things, but perhaps not discovered yet. So it's really, really important to study human origins and hominoid origins because when Bigfoot is discovered, it's going to fit somewhere on that tree. So I like to share a lot of information about our origins and how we became human, how we became highly intelligent, how we've outcompeted other species and kind of rose to the top, because I think that that'll tell us a lot about how Sasquatch behaves. So that's something that you can learn from my website. I also have different types of evidence like footprints, how to identify a footprint. So many times I get so many messages all day long of people sending me impressions in the ground. And it's so wonderful that they're all sharing their information. It's so important to run your findings by other researchers. And I myself do this all the time. But 9 times out of 10, the impression is usually caused by weather, or it could be a rabbit or another animal, misidentified animal. And so it's really important to know what you're looking for in the field in terms of footprints. Now, I don't want to take all the credit. I could never assemble a website like this just by myself. So I did assemble a team of researchers to come aboard the Forest Fleur family, and they reside all over the country. I have a team member that is from Colorado. I have one from Wisconsin, from California. And these 3 guys are really, really well versed in cryptozoology and specifically Sasquatch research. And so each of them help me in different ways. My team member, Connor, is kind of our evidence expert, and he has spent a lot of time analyzing footprint casts. And so he put together a guide for the website on how to identify footprints. And so it's been really wonderful to just share this information with others. And I'm learning along the way as well. We're all learning here. There's no such thing as a Bigfoot expert yet. Maybe someday there will be, but we're all learning together. And so, when you come to my website, you're going to see it change every few months because as I learn, I add things to it.
Definitely. Yeah, there's a lot of information on there. One of the things that I thought was really interesting on your I think it's the evidence page, you talk about the difference of Sasquatch intelligence and other great apes, and you reference the possibility that it has to do with REM sleep. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So my team member Levi actually came to me with this idea, and he was reading a book all about sleep because he was having trouble sleeping. And he said to me, Emily, there's something, yeah, he said, Emily, there's something really interesting about this book that I'm reading. He said, the author talks about REM sleep and how REM sleep developed our intelligence as a species. So REM sleep is basically when you get into a super deep sleep. It's almost like a sleep paralysis, and you're not thinking about anything. You're super relaxed, and your mind is developing while this is happening. And so scientists kind of theorize that the way that we became highly intelligent apes is because we started achieving REM sleep. The difference between us and other great apes is that we don't sleep in trees. Other great apes typically sleep up high. And so if they were to achieve a REM sleep, they would fall out of the trees and fall to their death and die. But us humans invented fire, or discovered fire, rather. And so we were able to keep ourselves safe on the ground. We were living in groups. We, started making fire. And so we would huddle up in these little groups and sleep on the ground. And we started achieving REM sleep, which is believed to have developed our cognitive ability and our decision-making capabilities. And so when you think about an animal like Sasquatch, right? They are way too big to be sleeping up in trees. And we do have evidence that suggests that they make ground nests and perhaps they're sleeping in them. So if we developed a social complexity and cognitive ability through REM sleep, then it may be the case for Sasquatch too. They may be highly intelligent and social, just like our own species.
Well put. Very well put. So I have, let's see. So one of the things that is pretty unique about you and your research is, you have all these researchers that go out and do investigating and stuff like that, and you take this one step further to the fact that it's not just research and stuff; it's about the preservation and the responsibility in the environment and stuff. Would you like to talk a little bit about that?
Sure, absolutely. I think that we are all guilty of harming our environment, right? You go to a picnic, you bring paper plates and plastic cups. We've all been there, right? But we can all take small steps to protect Sasquatch and their environment. And I think that we impact their environment more than we think, especially if you are an active researcher. I have heard of so many researchers doing things like gifting food to Sasquatch. You've seen it on TV shows, you've seen it, famous researchers doing it. They put out a piece of bacon or a donut or an apple for Sasquatch to come over and eat. But that could actually be really harming their species. Because when you look at history, we know that the chimpanzees in Gombe, Africa, they suffered from a polio epidemic because of human interaction. And that was during the time that Dr. Jane Goodall was studying the chimps in Africa. And she was so horrified by what she saw because it wiped out almost the entire clan that she was observing. They were all sick with this polio. And it came from human interaction. And so there's no doubt that we can pass disease to them. And so gifting is really not the best idea. Another thing that you definitely don't want to be doing is, harming their environment. Trash all over the place, not a great idea. wood knocks. A lot of researchers find this a little controversial, and I understand. Wood knocking is kind of a sound that we hear coming from Sasquatches. It sounds like a pop, or if you were to take a bat and hit it on a tree. And this is what we call a wood knock. Now, a lot of researchers will imitate this sound by knocking on a tree with a bat or a large stick. And I myself am guilty of doing it in the past. We've all been there, right? But recently, I came across something where I learned that tree bark is actually extremely sensitive. And if you break tree bark, it won't grow back like skin would. It's a barrier that protects that tree from insects and disease. And if you break that barrier, it can end up killing the entire tree very quickly. And so when I learned that, I thought, oh my gosh, I have to stop wood knocking. So, maybe a better solution would be to take two bats and click them together, right? So that you're not hitting the tree, or maybe a clap or some sort of mouth vocalization. And so as I learn more about Sasquatch and as I do more field work, I'm always discovering different ways that I can help preserve their environment. Conservation is a very tricky thing. And eventually I would like to get there, right? I'd love to talk to some policymakers and lawmakers and figure out how to conserve their habitat once they're discovered. But preservation is a little bit different, because preservation is protecting what's already there, right? Protecting what already exists. Conservation is more of, let's give them a greater habitat. Let's make it better. Preservation is, let's keep it the same for now until we can make it better. And so taking small steps like, using a reusable bucket to mix your plaster instead of a plastic bag, or, not putting out food that could potentially wipe out the entire family group in that area, taking those small steps can contribute to preserving their environment and their species.
Absolutely. I think more people need to be on that same page. Like I said, you're one of the few researchers that I've seen that takes an active role in that kind of research and that kind of promoting of those thoughts and that pattern. Most people are just out there looking and like me, but
listen, you know what? It takes a lot of thinking and a lot of work to get there, and we all will, but everybody kind of starts out at different points, right? As I started my field work, all of these thoughts just kind of went with it, so and we all have to open each other's eyes to things too. I mean, I've had people come to me and say, maybe we should be doing it this way, or maybe we should be doing it differently. And I'm always willing to learn. I always say that the biggest mistake you can make in this field is marrying your theories, because if you just commit yourself to the same mindset, you will never learn and you will never discover. Discovering is letting down your ego and admitting, you know what, I was wrong about that. This person is making more sense with their theory. I'm going to kind of piece together my own theory using this one and this one and this one, and just kind of reinventing your ideas every couple of months. I think that's the best way to go about it.
Absolutely. You can never stop learning, because even with science, you look at things that, science back in the day thought that the entire universe revolved around the Earth. And then we got more science and better educated and newer technology. And we're constantly learning newer things. And science itself, the things that are written in textbooks, these hard copies, that information is changing. So there's never a hard 100% answer to these questions.
That's a great point.
Thank you. So being on that point, you talked about being interested in Sasquatch and stuff your whole life. Were you interested in other creatures as well, or just mainly Sasquatch? And when I say other creatures, I mean like other cryptids and stuff. Yeah.
Right. I would say that it was always mainly Sasquatch. As I've furthered my research, opportunities have come up for me to study other cryptids, but I tend to steer away from them, because I think that what captures me so much about Sasquatch is their connection to human. I'm very fascinated with their intelligence level and their closeness to our own species. It's pretty creepy, in my opinion, to think about the fact that there is something out there that is pretty close to human. You know, we thought that chimps and gorillas and orangutans were the only thing that were close to us. But Sasquatch is out there and we don't know how intelligent they are. We can, make hypotheses and we can infer, but they could be just as smart as we are. They could have a verbal language. They could have a written language for all we know. And I just find that so creepy and intriguing and inspiring and exciting. And I don't really get that feeling with other cryptids. Not trying to downplay them at all. I mean, Mothman, I don't want to go near that thing with a 150-foot pole. I don't want to be anywhere near West Virginia because those type of things, I'm like, oh, I don't want to deal with that. But other cryptids are really cool. And I really am so glad that other people are out there studying them because we need as much coverage as we can get on all of them. But I tend to stick to Bigfoot. And many people ask me, if Sasquatch is discovered someday, which cryptid would you move to next? Well, I'd probably go to the Yeti and then the Orang Pendek and then the Yeren and whichever ones are most, closely related to human. And then I think I would probably start with Loch Ness and the Champ monster because I do think that's a pretty intriguing cryptid as well.
So you live up in New York, as you said. Have you gone looking for Champ at all?
I have not, but I do have a very good friend that did, and he swears that he saw something on his last trip to Lake Champlain. He is like totally convinced that he saw Champ. So I'm definitely looking to get up there this summer.
Very cool. We are planning on going up to the festival this year, and we got invited out with Kathy Elizabeth to go out and do some research with her as well. So we're looking forward to doing that.
It's fabulous.
Yeah. Yep. We got invited out there this year, but it was conflicting with another event we were at, so we didn't get a chance to go. So.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, I've heard it's a great event. Maybe I'll see you there.
Maybe. So back to your Bigfooting and stuff. When you first got introduced into Bigfoot and that stuff, what was your initial thought? Did you think that these things were flesh and blood, or do you think that they're some sort of paranormal or extraterrestrial, interdimensional? And has that changed at all from when you first got interested into now what you believe?
That's a really good question. Nobody has ever asked that before. I have to say, when I first saw the Patterson-Gimlin film and heard about Bigfoot, I kind of just thought it was its own thing. I thought that there was just one of them, right? Like Santa Claus or the Easter Bunny. I thought, okay, it's just one monstrous thing that maybe is alive from a different time, or, perhaps some sort of ape that's kind of an offshoot of us, or some kind of mutant something. But as my research has furthered, I have discovered that, this is a species. It's not just one Bigfoot. It's an entire species, and they are very closely related to our own. I don't tend to gravitate toward the paranormal, interdimensional side of things. But I am very glad that there are people out there researching that, because it sure is a possibility. I mean, there is absolutely no denying that in some parts of the country, there is some sort of correlation between UFO sightings and Sasquatch sightings. People will see saucers, and then others in the neighborhood will see Sasquatch. I tend to think that if there's a giant flying saucer in the sky, that Sasquatch is probably just as curious as we are, and they come out of their houses too and say, what the heck is this? But, I could be wrong. There could be some sort of connection. I have not seen any evidence of that. And if there is, I'm always open to exploring it. But I tend to stick to what we know, right? I like to start off with what we do know about the world. And what we do know is that we have a family tree full of viable candidates, of Bigfoot's ancestor. And so I like to study human evolution. I like to study the physical evidence like footprints. And then maybe in 50 years, if I discover evidence that there's some sort of connection and that they're interdimensional, I'll study that. But as of now, I just don't think there's a strong enough argument for that. And that's just my personal opinion. So I stick to the physical stuff.
Very good. Very good. Like I always say, when people ask me that same question, I can only go by what I've seen.
Right.
I've seen some weird things out in the woods in Bigfooting areas, but for the
Mhm.
most part, I've never seen anything connected directly to them. So
Right.
I would have to go with a flesh and blood as well. But
That's a great way to say it, and I feel the same way. I mean, people talk about the orbs. I have
mm,
certainly seen them myself. I saw a large orb out in Oregon when I was doing Sasquatch research, but it was on a night when there was no Sasquatch activity going on. So I didn't see any sort of correlation. I kind of think that energy does weird things and maybe there's something going on, maybe there's not, but it's certainly something that I've never seen together. So
very interesting. How big? What color was the orb?
it was like a white orb. I was in a car with three other people, and we all saw it, and we're like, "What the heck was that?" We thought, could that have been a reflector? But it was pitch black in the middle of the mountains, middle of the night, and it was a very strange thing. I've never seen anything quite like it. But like I said, I mean, energy does weird things, and I'm not sure what it was, but we didn't have any Sasquatch activity that night, so I don't think there was a correlation.
Definitely. And that's one of the things that I like to point out as well. When you're out in the woods, just because, you're looking for Bigfoot doesn't mean everything else isn't out there. There's a
Right.
lot of legends and lore of Fae and, the fairy folk and the will o' the wisp and all these other lights. And you can have all those other phenomenon and things that could be natural or whatever. And because you're there looking for Bigfoot, you have this um, focus on that. So naturally you're putting it all these things in the same basket, and it doesn't necessarily have to mean that. So
Yeah,
okay.
I like to say, I mean, when people ask me, oh, well, how do you explain people seeing lights in the sky and then Sasquatch? Okay, well, plenty of people see lights in the sky and then their neighbor's dog, or lights in the sky and a squirrel,
Yep.
I mean, I would you connect those two things, so that's kind of how I combat that question.
Mhm. I had a guest on here talking one day, and they said, these people see this UFO come and land in the woods, and then Bigfoot's running from it. Well, that doesn't mean that Bigfoot got off the UFO. It means that the UFO came down, and he's just as afraid of being abducted as we are, and he took off. And I'm like,
Right,
that makes a lot of sense. Just he doesn't want to be probed or abducted either, so he's going to take off. But I thought that was
right.
a very interesting theory as well.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I've got no doubt that, aliens are out there. I don't want to mess with them. I don't want to know about it. But I don't really see a connection. But hey, some people swear by it, so I'm glad there are people out there researching it.
Absolutely. All right, we have to take a quick break here for station identification, and we'll be right back with more of Emily.
Certified psychic medium Stephanie Lynn creates an authentic connection between the living and the spirit world. Stephanie knows she is here to help heal, educate, and provide validation that there is more after death, and allows herself to be a conduit and work as a team with spirit to pass on messages from their world to ours. Stephanie Lynn also works as a spiritual life coach to help you achieve, create, and manifest your best self and life. Looking for help communicating with an animal? Searching for a past life regression therapist? Or dealing with a paranormal experience? Stephanie Lynn is here to help. For a list of full services, visit her on Facebook under Stephanie Lynn Spirit Sensitive. That's Stephanie Lynn Spirit Sensitive.
right, guys, we are back here. I want to remind everyone that this is a recorded episode. We recorded this over the winter break because Emily is one of my guests that is just so hard to nail down that we had to do it recorded. So, Emily, can you remind everyone where can we get a hold of you if they have any questions for you?
You can find me at theforestfleur.com. That's theforest, FLEUR.com. And you can also find me all over social media at The Forest Fleur. I am most active on Instagram. So shoot me a message if you have any questions and come on over to the Forest Fleur family. We all share ideas and exchange theories. It's a lot of fun.
Absolutely. I said this already. You have a great website. There's so much information on there. You have all kinds of evidence and theories, and you have a whole sightings map on there as well of Bigfoot from all over the United States. And I was checking out some of the Wisconsin stuff because obviously Wisconsin, and there was a lot in there, and some of them I've seen before, and some of them I haven't. So is that stuff that you've gotten? I know some of the BFRO reports on there, and where do all those reports come from?
Yeah, so I do have a page all about reports, and that's one of my favorite pages on my website because it's a place that I send many people when they're asking me, where should I start out with field work? I think that when you start out with field work, it has to be kind of a mix of local reports and also habitat. And so whenever I go out, I look for the type of report, was it a male, female, juvenile, and where that report took place. Was it a road cross sighting? Well, if it was a road cross sighting, I might not want to go there. It's probably a heavily trafficked area and the Sasquatch was just passing through. But if somebody saw one in the dense forest of a valley, that might be somewhere where I would go because, might be a higher chance that I could see one. The map is actually assembled by Scott from the Bigfoot Mapping Project. And he has been an incredible resource and friend of mine. And he's assembled so many different maps for me, including the interactive map on my site. So what you can do is you can zoom right into the area that you live or a place that you might be traveling to. And you can find reports that are pulled from all sorts of databases like the BFRO and others, similar to that. And so it's been such a great resource. And he also has an app that you can download on your phone. It's the same map that's on my website. And I've used it many times while driving around looking for fieldwork spots. It's been such an incredible resource. And I'm really grateful to have met Scott. And he's got a great Instagram page, the Bigfoot Mapping Project. So if anyone's interested in checking that out, give him a follow because he's doing amazing, amazing work.
I have not talked to him myself, but I am familiar with his work and his site and his app. So that's an awesome website.
Very cool. I'll have to pass you his contact because he would probably be a great guest. I mean, he's so knowledgeable and he goes through every report himself to vet the reports before he puts them on the map.
That's a lot of work.
Oh, yeah.
we have a map on our website too, just for Wisconsin and some of the upper Michigan of stuff that we've received. And it takes me, it takes me quite a while just to put the information on there, but that's a lot of work. So I understand.
It's crazy. This is a hard job.
Absolutely. So you're from upper in New York, and a lot of people think that like New York, when you think of New York, you think of New York City for the most part, and New York City takes up a very tiny dot, and it's I don't want to say it's not even part of New York, or the state, but it's way down on the very little tip on a little island off there of New York, and you have this whole state and all these forests and natural area that people don't even realize is there. So has this been like the majority of where you work, or where else have you gone to investigate?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I grew up just outside of New York City, so going upstate was kind of like a treat for me, ooh, we're going to the mountains, and little did I know, I mean, the majority of New York State is like that. And so eventually, I did save up enough money to relocate up here in upstate New York. So I'm now in the mountains myself so that I could be closer to my research. But yeah, it's a wonderful place to conduct field work. the Adirondack Mountains have loads of reports. I've had my own encounter up there with some vocalizations not far from Lake George. And many people have encounters up by Lake Placid. And so I'm closer to the Catskill region, a ton of reports here as well. And so it's been just a treat to kind of study this state and conduct field work. During the pandemic, I did lose my job and my full-time job. And so I was able to kind of make my bigfooting career a full-time gig for a couple of years. I was in the financial position to do so, and I said, you know what, it's now or never. So I was going upstate New York once a month to conduct field work. And I discovered so many incredible areas and really amazing evidence while doing that. But I kind of thought to myself, I'm not sure if I'm doing this right. I'm picking areas based on sightings and, I'm not really sure how to get into these remote parts of the forest. Like, how do I do this safely? And so eventually I said to myself, how can I learn more? And I happened to have a team member out in Oregon. And so he invited me out to study under him and a few other incredible researchers. And I spent 3.5 months out in Oregon in the great Mount Hood National Forest conducting field work. And that's where I had some incredible experiences. I heard vocalizations myself clear as day, 2 higher pitched, 1 lower pitched, very close by. I mean, it was just incredible. And I heard rock clacking, I heard a grunt, I heard wood knocks. It was just the most amazing experience. And I am a very skeptical person when it comes to bigfooting. When I'm out in the woods and I hear a noise, I mean, growing up right outside of New York City, I've done a lot of experiments, right? So I've gone to nature preserves in areas where there are absolutely no Sasquatches. And I've looked around, I've listened to the noises. There were so many times where I heard something and I thought, well, most people would think this is a Sasquatch, but there's no possibility of them being here. So when I was out in Oregon, I put myself into that mindset, and any noise I heard, I thought, okay, it's probably not a Sasquatch, right? Most likely it's not. There were so many times when I would be out in the woods and I would go through everything in my head and there was just nothing else it could be. I ended up seeing a large man-like shadow pass between 2 trees. The moonlight was coming through the trees and backlighting them. And I just see this huge shadow pass between, upright, man-shaped, way bigger than any of us standing there. There was just so many things that happened that reassured me that this is real. This is out there. And, I'm doing the right thing. I'm researching it. And so I learned a lot about fieldwork out there. I learned about what to do, what not to do, what kind of sounds are Sasquatch, what kind of sounds aren't. Coyotes, for instance, make very similar vocalizations to Sasquatch, and you have to be careful when listening to the woods at night. But I think the most valuable lesson I learned is that Sasquatches can be anywhere. They can be close to town. There are lots of nature preserves very close to towns where these things are people are having high activity, and these things are really active. But then there are places deep in the remote forest where they're active. And so I think what all of us researchers are trying to do is kind of piece that together, right? How does that make any sense? Is it the same group of Sasquatches like coming close to town for food? Or is it one group of Sasquatches that, like the concrete jungle and another group that like the forest, it's just interesting to ponder, why there is such a variation in sightings and behavior. We have a consistency, right? We have certain behaviors and physical characteristics that line up. But then you have these areas. This one area that we were working in Oregon was right outside of town. There was a Taco Bell like 5 minutes down the road, yet we were having incredible activity. And that's where I saw this large shadow, and it was private property. So it's not like people were there. But then, we'd be 3 hours drive into Mount Hood National Forest and have activity there. So it was very interesting to me. And that was probably the biggest takeaway, is that don't feel discouraged. if you're in an area that is populated by people. You might be on a trail where people come through every so often, but that doesn't mean that your chances are going to be, significantly lower, because in order to have these sightings, you have to have a person and a Sasquatch in the same place. And being that we have so many sightings, it kind of tells us, well, that tends to happen pretty frequently. We kind of cross paths with them more often than people want to admit.
Yeah, we've had some sightings right on the edge of towns, like right across the river from an apartment complex. And yeah, we had that was one of our first investigations we did up in Rhinelander, Wisconsin. And there's an apartment building. They're hearing them howl from across the river there, and they got them on recordings and stuff. And we set up a base camp there behind their little apartment building garage system, and they had rocks thrown at them from across the river that night. So these things are right on the edge of town. And granted, the other side of that river is forest, and then there's a highway, and then forest.
Right.
But this is the edge of town. And they were believing that these things were coming in. It was right in the spring where the water opened up, and there was these little backwaters where the ducks and the geese were coming to nest at night. And they were coming down here to throw rocks at them and eat them, and the fowl that was down there. So that's what the people around the area and what we kind of thought was going on. And when the ducks and geese moved on, so did these creatures. So
wow, that's incredible. I've heard so many stories like that. I had a gentleman on my podcast, and he described this incredible encounter seeing a Sasquatch dumpster diving at his apartment complex. Yep. And it was in Tennessee, and his complex backed up to a kind of a big ridge and a forest. And go figure. I mean, they come close to our civilization sometimes. And I think it does depend on, the family group and how they kind of grew up, right? I mean, if they are on the East Coast, maybe they're used to people, right? We settled the East Coast first. So maybe they're, a little bit more agile in terms of avoiding people, maybe on the West Coast, since it was settled later. There's all these theories, and we'll really never know until we discover the species. But it's really fun to explore new areas. And it seems like whenever I go to a place where I don't think they'll be, that's when I have activity.
Very cool. I wanted to ask you a question here, because you are very intelligent on all this stuff and the science and the research of it. And this question has always kind of bothered me, and I get it asked of me as well. We have Gigantopithecus, right? And the only part of this entire creature that we have is a tooth. Yet here in these, school textbooks and all these museums and stuff, we know that Gigantopithecus existed. So why is this one tooth okay that we have proven Gigantopithecus to exist, but we have footprints, casts, hair samples, possibly, all this unknown DNA? Why haven't we set forward and, done the same thing with Sasquatch?
That's a fabulous question. And it's something that I talk a lot about with my team member, Levi, who's also from Wisconsin, actually. We talk a lot about this. He wrote a book all about the scientific defiance to relic hominoids. It's called The Sasquatch Paradox. It's actually up on my website if anyone's interested. But he basically goes through all of the evidence that we have of Sasquatch, right? Patterson-Gimlin film, Myakka ape photos, hair samples, footprint casts. And then he finishes off the book by talking about why the scientific community is not recognizing this discovery. The discovery is already in process, as Dr. John Bindernagel would say. So, it's something that I think has gotten a terrible stigma throughout the years. Sasquatch has gained popularity through the media, through being made fun of and dramatized. And I think at this point, the scientific community is just not interested in studying something with so little evidence. And you make a great point about Gigantopithecus. And there are other discoveries as well. I mean, do we know that a meteor hit the Earth and wiped out the dinosaurs? We didn't see it happen. We might have some sort of evidence in the ground, or some sort of minerals or whatever came off the meteor, that we can make a hypothesis and a conclusion that happened, but we weren't there to see it happen. And there are a lot of discoveries that the scientific community makes without having seen it themselves, without having proper physical evidence. And so why wouldn't it be the case for Sasquatch? And I think the main reason is just the stigma that it's received over the years has just been so poor that scientists are, hesitant to get involved with it. Another thing is Sasquatch is likely going to be very close to our own species. And the discovery of Sasquatch will completely rewrite the human evolutionary tree. There are many species that we kind of place as Australopithecines when really they might be a Homo species. For example, Australopithecus sediba is a species that I've studied in great depth. They have many characteristics that line up with not only our own species, but Sasquatch as well. There are so many things that line up. They have midfoot flexibility like Sasquatch. Their body type is very similar to Sasquatch. However, their brain structure is similar to ours. And so that could be a really good candidate for an ancestor of Sasquatch if Sasquatch has, social complexity and a brain and intelligence the way that we do, culture, language, things like that. So, when you look at the human evolutionary tree, Sasquatch is going to rewrite that entire thing. And it's going to make a lot of scientists look stupid because, they thought one thing, and now Sasquatch could end up rewriting all those species and saying, well, this, and this is actually a human, and this is an Australopithecine, and we were wrong about all of it. And so I think it might come down to an ego thing as well. I think that scientists are, proud of their discoveries. It would be like if you discovered Sasquatch and then someone came in and said, oh no, that's a robot, it's not even real. You'd feel bad about it because you were the person who made this great discovery, and now that's being taken away from you and rewritten completely, which I think contradicts the meaning of science. The scientific community is meant to challenge their own theories and evolve their own theories in order to learn more about the world. But it seems that many of them are reluctant to do so. But I am grateful for people in the scientific community that do acknowledge this species, Dr. Jeff Meldrum being one of them. And it's great that we do have people representing this discovery. But I also do say that as much as I resent the scientific community for not acknowledging this discovery, if they were all over it, then it wouldn't give me an opportunity to research. So their negligence has kind of given me the opportunity to become an investigator, and it's been really a pleasure to do so.
Very, very well said. And you touched on some points there as well. Like I know Cliff Barrickman, they do the monthly Q&A, and somebody asked him a similar question. And he said that, the scientific community and even Sasquatch researchers don't want to have this thing, discovered, because then all their theories and the books that they wrote are wrong. Mm-hmm. And it's just this ego thing for the scientists. And you had said that as well, like the person who discovered Pluto, and now, Pluto isn't a planet. Well, that guy's whole life work is just thrown out because right. Now everything that he's worked on is gone. And there's this back and forth. And we'd already talked about this earlier, that science is always evolving and learning. And it seems like, kind of like from the way you're talking here and stuff too, is that it's hit that plateau where they don't want to learn and they don't want to be open to that. And it's going to take a very, hard fought effort to bring that out and say, no, hang on, this isn't right. This is what it really is. So.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And it's a shame because, a part of me selfishly is excited because I get to do this, right? But then another part of me says, how many of these things really are left? This is a very time-sensitive discovery. And if we don't discover them soon and start protecting them, could it be the end of their species, before we make that discovery? And so, there's kind of two sides to the coin there. And it's definitely a difficult issue to address, because it's great that citizen scientists like ourselves get to go out there. But what's missing is the funding, right? We don't have the funding. The scientific community would have the funding to go out there and study these things. And so that's kind of where my product line comes in. And that's kind of how I fund my research. Unfortunately, I'm not able to do this full time right now. I do have a full-time job that's not related to Sasquatch. But all sales from my website go directly toward my research. It pays for gas, it pays for, camping fees, it permits, and it pays for, gear to go out there and look for Sasquatch, and I do it every weekend. I'm doing something related to Bigfoot research. And, some people, they like to scoff and say, oh, you're not doing enough, but really, who is doing enough? It's very difficult. You'd have to just quit your full-time job and have no health insurance and go out looking for Sasquatch, living in the woods for 6 months in order to find something. I mean, it's a very difficult thing to do. And when you look at, Dr. Jane Goodall, we knew chimpanzees existed, and it still took her 4 months to get close enough to study them. And that was 4 months every single day out in the field, so all of us, you and I, are working off, weekends, right? And so it's difficult because you take that amount of time that it took her and you just stretch it out, because we can't do this full time, most of us at least. And so that's what makes it very difficult, is like, even if you did want to do Sasquatching full time, you'd have to do YouTube, and you'd have to do podcasting, and you'd have to do all sorts of other things to bring in the income to be able to go out and research. And then that's taken away from your fieldwork time. So it's just a very difficult situation. And we really do need funding for researchers like ourselves. And it would really be helpful. But for now, we do what we can with what we have.
Absolutely. Well said. When you talk about like the funding and stuff like that, the for us to take this to the next level and the more seriousness, what do you think that's going to take?
I think probably a significant discovery is going to have to happen again, like the Patterson-Gimlin film. And so, I've been reevaluating my mission a lot this past year and figuring out how I want to discover Sasquatch. And I think that the best thing that I can do right now is capture, a couple hours of film, right? Go out in the woods, find an individual, a family, whatever it is, sit there undetected for an hour, film what they're doing, collect the footprints when they walk away, collect any hair samples, and perhaps the combination of all those things would be enough to warrant the scientific community's attention. I think that, as sad as it is, I don't know that when Sasquatch is discovered, that people like you and I will be able to continue researching it. I almost get the feeling that the scientific community is just going to like plow over all of us and be like, we know better. Mm-hmm. And, here we are sitting with binders of information and field notes and all of, you with your radio show. I mean, you have so many witnesses and people that come on talking about it. I mean, that's an archive of information. And sadly, I don't think it's going to be referenced. So I think right now, the best course of action for anybody who is discovering evidence is to keep a log of it, keep collecting it, do as much as you can until you get to the point where you have a plethora of evidence, and then release it. Because if you do release it prematurely, I think it could cause problems because yes, they are scientists, but they're also going to be very eager to solve the mystery for themselves. And when you have people that are more concerned with their ego than the survival of the species, everybody is going to be pushing each other out of the way to get into those woods. And these things are going to die. Things are going to happen. The habitat's going to be affected. And so I think that the best thing that we can do as citizen scientists is kind of keep quiet under the radar, share amongst ourselves, right, until we have enough evidence to kind of come out and say, here's everything. We did it all for you. And so, you don't have those people with crazy egos running out in the woods, trying to shoot one, trying to get the information first. Because you have to understand, like, this is going to be the greatest discovery of our time. I mean, whoever discovers Sasquatch, whether it's you, whether it's me, it makes all the difference who it is. because you're either going to have somebody that gets on TV on the news channel and says, yeah, I discovered it, and this is how I shot it, and this is how I dragged it to my truck. And, that's going to be one person. A person like you or I is going to get on there and say, yes, we've been studying them for months. Here's how they behave. Here's how you can interact with them in the woods. Here's how we can protect them. And it's going to make all the difference who discovers Sasquatch. And so that's why I'm so eager to collaborate with researchers with the right intentions, because it really is a team effort. And if the wrong person discovers this, it's really not going to end well for the species.
Very well said. Very well said indeed. Yeah, you make a great point there. Somebody driving along hits it with his car, or you got, the hunters out there that, say, oh, I shot one, or whatever. And, it's definitely matters who's going to come across it, and back to your point earlier about the how you want to discover it, I think it was Cliff Barrickman that said, it's not going to be, if it's not a type specimen, an actual dead body brought in, or a live one in a cage brought in, the best way to discover it is going to be to have a mass amount of everything from one location. You have audio, you have video, you have footprints, you have hair samples, all of this collected in one small location to say, this exists, it was all captured, this is how I got it. And you're absolutely right. That's definitely, aside from having a body, that is going to be probably the only way that we're going to move forward with this.
It really is. And, easier said than done. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah. Good luck getting your hour worth of footage there.
Right. Thanks.
I'd be happy if one walked in front of my car. I mean, that's right. Footage enough right there. And you want an hour? Good luck with that.
I know, it's definitely, it's going to be very hard to achieve, but it's a goal that I'm sticking to. And, you hear about people, right? I just heard an encounter recently of a hunter, and he observed a Sasquatch eating a raccoon for like 45 minutes. And I thought to myself, this was back in 1990 or something. So he didn't have a cell phone on him, but I was thinking to myself, if something like that happened in this day and age, maybe he would have pulled out his cell phone and captured a decent video of it. So I'm hoping that as technology advances, there might be some more opportunity to get video like that. But as you said, it can't just be video. It has to be a combination of footprint casts and hair samples. It's got to be all the different types of evidence, and kind of an exact location where it occurred. That's another thing. A lot of people have sightings and then they can't remember where it was. So that's another important factor. But yeah, it's not an easy mystery to solve, but what mystery is, right?
Absolutely. We're coming up on the end of the show here. I want to thank you so much for your time. I have one more thing I wanted to talk to you about, is, a lot of people say, there's no evidence and stuff like that. Well, there's a lot, and there's a lot of pictures and video and stuff that are out there that, people don't share because of ridicule, or they don't want people, these people on their property and all that. And whenever people ask me, like, why doesn't the government, go out and look for these things or whatever? There's three things that I have to tell them. And I want you to touch on this, first of all, you have the people that are either going to go out in the woods and look for these things and hunt them. Let's say the government came out and said that these were real and we had them. So you're going to have all of a sudden these people that are going to go out there hunting them. And, you don't want that. Number two, you're going to also have all the people that you hear all these missing 411 cases and stuff. And these people are out there going, well, if you knew that these things existed, why are you letting my family go out there? Why didn't you tell me and warn me? And this opens up a whole nother can of worms. And then to your point, you have conservation. And what that's going to do is it's going to take all these areas that these animals are known to inhabit, and you're going to shut them down. There's no more logging, no more oil, no more anything in these areas. And that's going to cost individual companies a lot of money. It's going to cost the government a lot of money. And even if, I've had people come up to me at conferences and stuff and say, if the government can go out and track down one person in the desert sands overseas, why can't they find a 9-foot tall hominid in the woods? Well, maybe they can, but this is why they're not doing that. And I would love your opinion on that.
Sure. So a researcher, I once asked this question to a researcher, and he said, it's not really the government's job to discover Sasquatch. It's the scientific community. And so that was kind of an interesting thing. And it's true. I mean, the government is not really in the business of discovering unknown species of animal, but is this an animal or is it more of a human? I think that you've raised some excellent points. If Sasquatch turns out to be a Homo species, right? I'm not saying that it is a Homo sapien, but we have Homo naledi, we have, Homo denisovans, like we have other Homo species. So if it is a Homo species and it's similar to us, would it get certain rights? Would it get reservation type things like us Homo sapiens have, and certain properties, right? I don't necessarily think that a Sasquatch is going to know the end of its property. I mean, maybe they do have some sort of language and we can communicate with them and say, this is where you live and this is where we live. But I don't really think that's going to be the case. So like you said, if they are discovered, places like, state parks, national forests will probably shut down for quite a while until enough research has been gathered to determine that this species is, I think that there's going to be some sort of frenzy and probably a lot of fear. I think like we discussed before, the way that it's announced is going to be very important, because if people start fearing it, then, people are going to be either running into the woods looking to shoot it, and they're going to be shooting each other, and it's going to create a very dangerous environment, or they're not going to want to go in the woods at all. So state forests and national forests, I think, are going to shut down for quite a while until these species, until there's more information on the species. And of course, you're going to have people that come out of the shadows. Oh, these things are killing people. They're dangerous. People went missing. This is why. I think if they were as dangerous as some people think they are, there'd be a lot more of us missing, especially the ones looking for them. But I don't think that, they're sunshine and butterflies. I mean, they can absolutely be dangerous. They are like a gorilla or a chimpanzee or a Homo sapien. We're all dangerous apes. Every ape that exists on the planet is highly intelligent and strong physically, and they are dangerous. Chimpanzees steal human babies and eat them. Gorillas get territorial and can charge you. I mean, there is violence among apes. And so I think that if Sasquatch is discovered, it is going to create a huge disruption. And so I don't think the government wants any part of it. I think if anybody's going to do anything, it's going to be the scientific community, but they don't seem to want to have a part in it either. So it'll be interesting to see that when they are discovered, how are these two organizations going to act? How is the scientific community going to act? How is the government going to act? Are there going to be laws put in place? And I think that's where withholding the information is important. And don't get me wrong, I mean, we don't want to be researchers that keep absolutely everything to ourselves, right? We want to be able to share with others, and we want to be able to share tips with others on how to collect evidence and find the right location. But I think that in terms of discovering the species, if you're coming across some significant evidence, the best thing that you could do is just document it until you have everything thought out, right? You don't want to come out with a discovery, as exciting as it is, without having a plan on how to protect them. Because the last thing we want to do is create chaos and a frenzy, and then all of our beautiful national parks and state forests are shut down. We want to be able to get on that news channel and say, yeah, I've been studying these things for 3 years. They're not, they're only dangerous if they're provoked. Here's how you should act towards them if you run into one. You're likely not going to run into one. You know what I mean? And I think if it's presented in that way, then maybe there would be less damage on places run by the government and even corporations and loggers and people that are trying to demolish the woods. I think there will be less of an impact on them if this discovery is presented the correct way. And somebody else once told me he was researching the fact that Sasquatch has kind of adapted into our lifestyle, right? Like we tear down the forests, we build, but they've adapted to it. So clearly, like we're not doing anything that's causing them like horrific harm right now, right? So maybe logging can be cut down and scaled back. Maybe it doesn't have to stop completely because it seems like they're avoiding it as is. I mean, I'm certainly not advocating for tearing down every forest, but, there is a compromise that has to be made. There are people that have jobs doing logging, right? A lot of people would be out of a job, and, how would we build our houses? There are things that need to be compromised on. And so it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out.
Absolutely. It has been amazing talking to you. You are very, very knowledgeable and just a pleasure to have on the show. And I could talk to you probably the rest of the day here. But there's so much we haven't even covered yet. I mean, you also have your own podcast, and I believe you just posted that you have a YouTube channel coming out as well, correct?
I do. I'm actually releasing it this weekend for New Year's, so stay tuned for that.
Very cool. Do you have a name for it yet? Because this is going to release after New Year's. So, do you know what the name is and everything, and how to find that then?
Well, I'm hoping that the name will be The Forest Fleur, but as we all know, sometimes names are taken on social media platforms and things of that nature. So I will definitely be posting about it all over my social medias. I'll be linking it on my website, so it will definitely be front and center on all my platforms. It's been such a pleasure talking with you as well, and I feel like we share a lot of the same ideas, so we should definitely collaborate sometime.
Definitely. I look forward to it. And hopefully I get to see you out in the field. I see you're going to be at the International Cryptozoology, whatever that is, conference up in Portland, right? The
yes.
Lauren Coleman one.
Will you be there?
I'm thinking about it. I haven't, I have another event the same day. So it'll depend which one I can make it out to, and if I have the time to get up there. But I would like to come check that out. It sounds like it's going to be a good event. So
yeah, definitely let me know. And then there's the Whitehall, New York conference in September, which is just growing rapidly every year. So that's another one to check out.
Absolutely. Do you have any other events that people can find you at this year that you know of yet?
Honestly, my main event that I always do is the Whitehall Festival. That is kind of my main jam, and I've actually been helping to run it the past couple of years. And so this year I'm really putting in a lot of effort to make it bigger and better than ever with the organizer. And so that's the event that you can always find me at, Whitehall, New York in September, dates to be announced. But yeah, the only other one I'm going to do this year is the Cryptozoology Festival in Maine, and that will be in May. And then I was asked to do the Texas Bigfoot Conference. I believe that's in October. So I'm kind of talking with the organizer right now about that, and I'm really hoping to be able to be a speaker there. It would be so much fun to meet everybody down there, and I've always wanted to go to Texas, so it'll be exciting.
Very cool. Well, hopefully I get a chance to see you. Maybe if you go to Vermont to the Lake Champlain Festival, Festival, I'll have to let you know if I get out there, and we'll have to hang out.
I would love that. I'm really hoping to get out there for that one. I've heard it's a great event, so hope to see you there.
Definitely. All right, guys. Well, remind everybody where can we find you and your website again?
You can find me on theforestfleur.com and on social media at The Forest Fleur. I have it written right in my little name down here, so if anyone needs it, you can reference that. And I'm excited to meet everybody. Come on over and join the family.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on. I'm glad that we finally got this worked out, and hopefully we can have you back on someday and talk about more of your research and some of your sightings, and hopefully you have some cool big announcements and other stuff to share it along the road. So reach out to me, obviously, if you have anything, and hope to have you back again.
Yeah, anytime. Great meeting you.
You too. All right, guys, thanks for watching this week's episode, and make sure you go check out Emily's page and all of her stuff and website and all the stuff you got for sale there, and it's really cool. So go check it out. And until next time, guys, we'll see you out there.